Welcome our guest for the evening, Robert Manasier from In Focus Brands. We know each other a little bit, so we kind of go back and forth, but it's all in love. So
Heckling is permitted,
heckling is, we encourage heckling, in fact.
except from John.
Bob, this has been a long time coming. You know, we kind of set this up last year and been looking forward to the opportunity to get you in the hot seat and really Vulcan mind meld you, pick your brain about what it means to really be a business owner. You do a lot of work with helping other businesses to run better. You've been doing that for years. You've got a few different places that you operate from. You've got In Focus Brands, which is brand strategy and business, go-to-market execution. You've also got In Focus Brands. You've got IFP Films, which is a 25-year-old film company, which is unheard of in the industry. And that's part of what we'll talk about is retention and building a culture, because that's something that you've really done well, not just for yourself, but you teach other businesses how to do that too. So I want to start off and just ask you, when did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? When did that start for you?
I think I'll clarify that question by saying I don't really know what I want to be when I grow up, so I'm still learning. When I was very young, I had this very naive notion that I never wanted to work for anybody. So I created a company with my friends from my football and baseball team. It took me about 20 hours to realize that when you are the leader, whatever that means, that crap ramp runs uphill, it doesn't run down, and that you actually work for everybody, your employees, your clients and employees' families, friends, neighbors, whoever. You have to answer for everything to everyone. And what I realized fairly quickly is that I actually liked that servant leadership part. It was very important to me to keep people together, to build a culture where it mattered, empowered people, educated people, developed people, and finding the right people to fill in all my weaknesses became my constant goal, and I'm still doing it today. And that's what we do for a lot of companies. We figure out how to make them a stronger team by finding the elements that they're missing.
So one of the things that I know you do just very supremely well, you start off from a place of relationship building. Even as you are, for your own companies, as you are exploring options for bringing people into the company, relationship is something that's very important. Was it always that way? Did you start off that way when you first began building your companies, or is that something that you came to?
I think it's just part of who I was. So when you're an entrepreneur or looking to start something up, the first thing you really have to do is look inward. We do everything from the brand side internal first. You really need to understand what you're good at, what you're bad at, how you work, what you need around you to make you more efficient. That takes a relationship build. It's also a lot easier over time. It sounds harder to build relationships, but as humans, we think we're really rational and we make really smart decisions, but the decision tree is always the same. I like that person, I trust them over time, and somewhere down 3 or 4 or 5 is I like the product or service they're selling. So if you go from that perspective where there's a mission drive that you have to like each other, but you also have to work together, I think that's a better way to start than saying I just need to cross this transaction off my list. So if you're building a relationship, people buy that way anyway, so why not form companies that way too?
So as we're talking about kind of the relationship, you mentioned brand building. Did you find, or do you find in your work that companies, when you're helping them to build internally, is that one of the first things that you have to look at? Is how their relationships are amongst themselves? Do you have to make changes there before you can get them to that next level for their businesses?
Did Paul write that question? Paul, did you write that question? Yeah, he's not answering. All right. We always start, as I said before, internally. You need to look at the dynamics of the team that you're actually helping. Sometimes it's one person, so who do they need around them to form the team? A lot of times when they have multiple members, there's a lot of redundancy in the team. You need to set expectations, set responsibilities so people aren't falling over each other, but it also keeps them super focused on what they're good at or what they love to do. This part of these guys shooting are part of that 25-year-old team. And in the film world, you usually work week to week on projects. My vision for a company that's supposed to do business and art was that in order to get true collaboration and input, you had to empower and give ownership to the people creating. And in that setting, it works better. But then we realized it works everywhere. Any company would do better if you could meld the two together and not have people being redundant in their jobs or not having any skill at all. You keep your teams very tight in startups because you don't have any cash. But as you grow out, you don't want to just add layers of bureaucracy because then you become very irrelevant to the marketplace.
So that's two of the things that we're going to kind of break out tonight have to do with culture, creating a culture, and also retention. And those are two things that you've already touched on. Because I know, as you mentioned, in the film industry alone, it's a week-to-week thing, and yet you've managed to build something that is solid. And I know that as I have had opportunities to work with you for startup weekends, we work together in some of the other projects that I've worked with you on. The one piece that really always, even from the very beginning, was very apparent during startup weekend is the concept of fun. So as we're talking about building a culture, as we're talking about building relationships, fun, was that something, that's just who you are? Because you're kind of crazy.
That's who they are, too.
That's kind of, yeah, but I'm saying, so
I'm kind of crazy,
so you're
thank you.
kind of crazy. So you build, the fun is the piece, the fun and the high energy is something that, how do you keep that going? Like what again, does that come back to the people?
Well, it's a lot of work. You just have to put the time in, too. To build a relationship, it takes time. We don't expect anybody to trust us right off the bat. We're not going to trust anybody right off the bat.
Right.
It's developed over time. But going back to fun goes back to a philosophy that people say they have a work life and a play life. Ours is all the same. I think when it's a mosaic, a true puzzle, it works better. You don't feel like you're working, but you're working all the time. It just works for us, and it's worked for us for a lot of companies. So I think that's a better way of looking at it, and I think as technology makes life easier to stay in touch with people, you're seeing more and more flex time and options where you don't have to be in the same office 8 to 4, 9 to 5. Quite honestly, anybody in my organization that wants to work 8 to 4 in an office probably wouldn't last 2 days with us, because that's not how we work and that's not what we want to do, and it makes us very weak. Because we get bored and then we play solitaire on the computer and stuff.
As you were building your businesses,
Or Madden football, actually.
even from, you said you discovered really early when you started your first company, when you recruited friends and colleagues that you were playing the team with. What misconceptions did you discover? Like, you discovered quickly that to make a boss means that everything runs uphill. But were there other misconceptions that you saw then and that you've seen over the years as you continue to build companies?
So I think if you always want to be better, you're always finding mistakes that you make, and I've probably made 70 mistakes just in the last hour in any of my companies. So I think misconceptions, I still have them. I'm still trying to fight through them. One of the things I would say to most startups is don't hire your friends right away unless they're a perfect fit. The company I first started had very low skill level needs. A lot of heavy lifting, they were good at that. When it came to beyond that, it didn't work so well. So sometimes doing business with friends is not the greatest idea you can have to start off with. And that's the first thing I probably do now, is never start anything with a friend. Let it develop over time and then bring friends in later when there's more structure.
So,
and family, by the way, too.
I was gonna go on to the next question, but talk about, you said you wouldn't do it, but talk about why. Why would you not have family and friends in the beginning as your...
So this is like, listen to me, but don't follow what I do, because I have family and friends in all my companies. I just think if you're just starting out for your first time, all those deep layers of relationships get in the way of good business decisions. It also masks people's weaknesses, because you'll put up with more garbage from people that are close to you. And John's waving his hand. Yeah.
Oh, you have to look. Hi, John.
He had to get noticed.
So
I don't know if I answered that question. Did I? That's good enough. Okay.
Okay, we'll let that rest. We can come back to it. What do you? You start your own company. A lot of people start companies and realize, for whatever reason, often the pathway is I'm an employee, and then for whatever reason I want to start my own company. But you went right into being your own boss because you didn't want to work for someone else. So some people, like, this is not for me. What do you love about being an entrepreneur that has kept you being an entrepreneur?
I love doing something different almost every day. I love the relationships I've developed, that I have a network of people that goes back 25 or 30 years. For me, it's always the relationships. It's meeting new people, learning about new ideas, putting new teams together. That kind of keeps me going every day, and you know, there's something better, and I can build something bigger later on, or the next one.
So, and how do you determine that? Like, how do you determine when it's time to either start another company? Because you've been involved either in the starting or the building or the building out of more than 100 startups, and that's not even, you know, the companies that you've helped do turnarounds. So how do you know when it's, you know, time to start something new?
If I had that answer, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be on a beach somewhere, lost to civilization. I think a lot of times it's a leap of faith. It's that you believe in the people that you surround yourself with. I don't look at the product or the idea first. I look at the team I'm going to work with or the team that I have to build. That's just our way. I don't know if that's the best way. Obviously, we've had a lot of failures. I think you have to embrace failure and learn from it. If I sat up here and said I was always successful, you should throw things at me. If anybody says that to you, you should throw things at them too, because that's impossible.
So one of the things, you know, as we talk about failure, one of the tenets that separates Startup Grind from some of the other entrepreneur events is we really are interested in the story. And I know that you are a storyteller, and we'll come to that piece. But it really, Startup Grind is almost more interested in what have you overcome? What are the things? And that, even the concept of you failed at something, but you're not a failure. So what are some of those things that you can look at and say, yep, that helped me to be a better boss, a better employee, something that you've overcome in your career?
I think every day, as long as you're paying attention and listening, you're overcoming something that you screwed up the day before. It's all right to be a failure. People put different labels on it to make it sound nice. Sometimes you just fall flat on your face, and you screwed up big time. And I can name 40 companies where it was my mistake it went under. Do you learn something from it? Hopefully. I think the act of getting back up and doing it again is more important. You hear that all the time. We're very sports-minded in our companies because we fight a lot and we play a lot of sports for money, and we compete for beer and wings and all that good stuff.
I'm sorry, beer? No.
I think Patrice has had a few before she came here.
So
if you're sports-minded, though, you understand. If you're an athlete, especially, you understand you're going to fail more than you're ever going to succeed. A 300 batter in baseball misses 7 times out of 10. If you focused on the negative, then you probably wouldn't get up to the plate again, right? You just got to keep going. But you also have to learn from it. You just can't go blindly into the next thing. And a lot of times it goes back to the people you surround yourself with. If you put all like-minded people around you, and I'll just speak for myself, a room full of me would be a disaster. I don't want that. That's why I have people that have a lot of skill, and they make me look better than I actually am. But it's that internal understanding of all my weaknesses and what I don't love to do. And if you want me to do it, I'm probably not going to do it. And if I have to do it, it's going to take me 2 days where somebody else could do it in 10 minutes. I mean, that's a self-realization that I think any entrepreneur should go through. And I think a lot of times our failures are in the fact that we think we're somebody we're not.
So it sounds like what you're saying, one of the important factors is, we talked a bit about knowing the people that you're surrounding you with, but you said it starts internally. So what are some ways that, I know we've got a lot of students that are here, we have some folks that are already in business, maybe looking for some tips to kind of scale, but what are the kind of things that we should be kind of looking at in ourselves, because we're kind of doing that self-assessment, because if we don't know ourselves, it probably is kind of tough to know what we need in those other capabilities.
So there's a true dichotomy for entrepreneurs, is where we have to listen to what people are saying about us because we can't go blindly off the ledge. But a certain part of us has to have a really strong ego or confidence in ourselves because everyone's going to say no. My family still to this day does not think I have a job. It's that easy. So that's a weird balance that you have to figure out for yourselves. And for me, it always starts with, what do I love to do? Who do I need in this company we're starting that I can't do? So I started a financial service firm 7 years ago. I am horrible at paperwork. I am not the cross the T's and dot the I's guy. I found a partner who loved that and would sit in the office all day long filling out these ridiculous FINRA forms that in 2 hours he would be done, and it really would sit on my desk for a month and I never get it done, which means then you're out of compliance and then you're in big issues. Anita knows. So it's understanding like, okay, I'm not good at it and I don't like to do it. So let me find somebody who's really good at it and that I can pair up with. He's easy to deal with. He's not some crazy salesman that's going to try to sell everybody and his brother an L annuity or some kind of bad stock. And we call it now in InFocus Brands' fancy term, directional resourcing. Everybody tells you to know everything in your company. I'm going to tell you that's not the way. If you build a true team that's collaborative, you have your responsibilities, you have your forte, you have your greatness. There are other people that can fill out the team better than you can in certain areas.
And so it's important to know what those things are. Now, I know that part of being an entrepreneur, it's, is the excitement. And a lot of people are like, I discovered that it's not enough to just have great skills, right? It's not enough, even in a job where you perhaps excel and you do really well in your position. Having great skills is a very different thing from running a company and owning a business. So it kind of almost goes around again to finding those teammates, really, finding the people that work.
It's also to test it, right? You should never just jump in 100%. If you have a job, I always tell every one of our clients, keep your job. We have a team that'll help you launch so that we can balance your work and your life and all that good stuff, and you can still keep a salary coming in. Because the time to fail really is when you're in school, because you have a roof over your head and you can eat. When you go out in the world and you have a house and a family, you really can't take as big a misstep, or you lose your house. And I've had clients that lost houses and their families broke up over, bad decisions. So,
part of the jump comes from excitement, right? So if we look at a company as being an automobile, right? It's a vehicle, and if the fuel is that enthusiasm and that excitement, that variety, and it's shiny, it's like that whole, there's so much that's new and it's exciting. How do you balance keeping? Because you need a certain level of, like you talked about the confidence, right? But you also need balance. But how do you do that? How do you keep the excitement and the enthusiasm without just running off a cliff?
I think a lot of people, something they love to do like a hobby, they think I'd be great doing this as a business. And the first thing you learn is once you create a business out of your hobby, it's miserable. Because you don't get to do all the fun stuff. You actually have to do all the administration and all the background. So people who are thinking about hobbies to be careers, they should really try to work with somebody else that has a similar business, or even take an internship and just see if they really like all the dynamics of it. Excitement's very important. One of the reasons that we only put our staff in positions where they really love to do it, and that's where their focus is because it never feels like work. If you're banging it out every day, as most entrepreneurs have to do, in normal days, 18 to 20 hours when you start in a company, that gets old and tired very fast. And the things we've run out of very quickly aren't just money. It's time and passion and patience, and you lose the ability to listen to people. And I think the greatest skill anybody, if you walk out of here, the only thing you have to do is really listen to people. Talk less and listen. Even if you don't agree with them, there's a perspective there. There's a lot of companies where you come into and the interns get you coffee and make copies. We call it throwing people into the deep end of the pool. We give you responsibilities right away because everyone in this room is a consumer. Everyone has a value to a business because you are a potential buyer, okay, or a potential viewer, or whatever you want to be in whatever company you're running. You need to value that. And the moment that you discredit somebody, then you're really not paying attention to the marketplace. And the only king in business is the marketplace. I can sit here and give you all my great ideas. If the marketplace doesn't accept them, I don't have a business. And until there's money transacted, it's not a business. It's a hobby or an idea. And I think that's where most people get lost in this startup world, is they're in love with the idea, but they've never tested it in the real world. And until you make that test, it's not really a business. Excuse me.
So,
Did that answer your question?
It did answer my question. So it sounds as if, again, that balance between really having your confidence, but also having that listening and that awareness to be able to take advice. But it would seem that there are certain elements of being an entrepreneur or being a business owner that are sort of solitary. But at some point, you're going to need to be able to collaborate whether that's to get team members, whether it's your vendors, you know, the customers even. So how do you balance that independent solo spirit and still, you know, be able to develop those skills to be a collaborator?
I'll answer from our perspective is there are a lot of very smart people that have no skills whatsoever when it comes to social interaction or talking to people. We cocoon them. They don't really want to talk to people. Most of them don't even like people. You put them and let them do what they're great at, and they spin out more ideas than we could ever imagine. But you also need to build a team around them that's going to be the face. And that's the dichotomy of a great company, right? Everybody doesn't have to be the face. Everybody doesn't have to be in sales and business development. You need people who are just the thinkers and the people creating new things. But you need to create an environment where there's a symmetry and also an equal respect. Because a lot of times as the organization grows, you get these kind of differences in respect levels and how people are treated. You kind of you have to make sure internally that your communications are strong. And most startups don't have this issue because it's three people sitting in a basement arguing over something. Those arguments are very important, okay? We love arguing. Most of my family are Italian, so we fight all the time. It's all done from a level of love and respect, maybe, but we say that anyway. And Zach knows that because he has the same dynamic in his company. So, I mean, and always have an odd number because even numbers, you can't make a decision. So your board, as you grow, it has to be odd.
I want to have to be odd. You've got that.
Odd
I'm
numbers.
Sorry, odd numbers, not odd personality.
No, not odd person.
I want to go back to culture. I've been hearing. I think the past several interviews that I have, maybe the last two or three, culture has really come up a lot, and there's a lot. You know, Inc. magazine. I'm reading a lot about the importance of a culture within a company, and just really not how to make that happen, but the importance of it. It's not just people in jobs that have titles and working in roles. I know that there are some companies that we've encountered that really are very siloed. They're departments, they're in the same building, they're under the same umbrella, but they're not working, you know, from a joint kind of a thing. You have done that. Again, that comes back to the retention issue. How do you go about building a culture in a company to last, that's respectful, all the things that you've talked about? What does that entail?
I'll just tell you why culture is important for anybody. It's a great attractor of the right people. Companies spend millions of dollars on HR, and they don't really have to if they really know who they were. Because if you really know who you are and what you stand for and how you work, people are going to see that, and the ones that like it are going to come towards you. And it becomes a very big filter point. And it limits all the wasted time of getting 1,000 resumes for a job where 999 of them are useless anyway, because they would never fit in the culture. They would never fit in the real job description. So that's how we use culture and why we love culture. Figuring out the rest is you constantly have to, and I'll just speak for myself, right? They can have anybody in my company can have a different opinion at any time. We don't have any bureaucracy. Most of our meetings look like we're going to beat the crap out of each other. But it's all fun, and then we go out, so it's all good. It's the fact that you have to take the idea of you being a coach. If you run the company, you are coaching people to be better than you. On all my cards, it doesn't say I'm CEO. It says I'm current CEO. Because if somebody comes to my organization is better than I will gladly step aside. Because then I have less work to do, and maybe I'll make more money, and then I can do other things. So it's the fact that you empower people, you develop them, and let them grow into who they want to be. Don't try to put structure on them if they don't need it. In our organization, if you need to be micromanaged, you will not last 24 hours with us. Because you're given responsibilities, you're given deadlines, and then you're free to go wherever you want to do it. Right now, we have 3 crew members surfing in Hawaii.
What?
As long as they get their work done, we don't care.
What about creating, as you're creating that culture, what about community engagement? There are a lot of companies that we see, or a lot of businesses that we hear about. Some companies actually have a department that's dedicated to giving back or whatever. How is a good way to not just, and maybe it starts from the culture, but to build something that is a giving back outside of commerce?
So why you would get involved with a culture or a community very early is really just to network, to find the right people that you want to be part of your company. you can't really give back because you don't make any money. A lot of companies now, you know, you have all those classifications of social entrepreneurship, social businesses, mission-based. That's all good, but until you can give money back to those missions, it doesn't really mean anything. And a lot of people are using it as almost a fake calling card to get traction. When you're starting a company, get in bed with the community, volunteer where you can, but balance it because you still have a business to build and run. We live in an age where everybody wants to be an entrepreneur and it's very sexy, and I'll put quotes around that. Anybody who's actually built their own company knows what a disaster it is for a long time, and most of the days you wake up thinking that you're absolutely insane for doing this. But you keep going because you believe in it. Or more importantly, you believe in the people around you. I think there were many times that I would have stopped, but I had certain people around me that wouldn't let me. And they kept me honest with myself. When my ego got too big, they made fun of me. When I was feeling too low, they picked me up. That's the job of a team. That's the job of your friends. Sometimes your friends and family are the worst ones because they want you to be happy and safe. And I'll just talk for my parents. They want me to go get a job where I get a check every 2 weeks, which is very cool. That's their worldview. It's not mine, right?
So you said a couple things. Ego is something that comes up, and it could be a good thing, and bolstering, but have you also seen where that has created an issue for companies, if it's a top-led company where that, you know, that figurehead is very ego driven?
Well, I mean, you all have to look inside to yourself, right, to build a company that's going to match who you are and how you work. There are a lot of ego-driven businesses that are very successful. I'm not going to talk bad about them because they're doing a good job. They built a culture that works for them. I don't know if the people inside the culture are always that happy. For me, it's more important that everybody's having a great life. My people, my staff, my clients. We work hard, but we also have this really cool life because we maybe only get one of them. So for us, it's more important that we balance that somehow, or we just do them both all the time, 24 hours a day. I'm not gonna, you know, the other thing is we're always focused on the positive. So, you know, you can sit here and bash other people's cultures. If it's working for them and they're not hurting anybody, then they did a good job and they were true to themselves. I just can't build that kind of company. I need a roundtable company. I need people who are giving me input even when I didn't ask for it, because it just keeps me grounded.
What about mentorship? I know that you actually have been nominated recently for the Upstate Venture Ecosystem Awards as a magical mentor. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So how important, I mean, obviously that's something that you do. Is that something that you learned because you had great mentors, or is that just coming just naturally from you?
For me, I think everybody I meet is my mentor. I really try to pull out of everyone something. That goes back to listening more than talking, which is very odd that I'm sitting up here talking more than listening. But I think everybody you meet, going back to that we all have value in the marketplace, that's the most important for me as a mentor. You should be learning every day. I've been very lucky to be surrounded by 35 people for decades that are great mentors to me. And we've learned together, we've failed miserably together. It's been a good ride, but so every day we learn something new. And certain days somebody else has to take the lead because I'm really bad, or it's not my forte, or I just suck that day. Somebody else has to step up and take it. And that's when you have an equal kind of path that other people fill in your mistakes. When you're top down, it's kind of on you. And if you screw up, you can blame somebody down the chain, but when you look in the mirror, you know it was on you. When everybody's on the same collaborative path, somebody else is going to be a star someday, and they should, and everybody should have the chance to be a star, and everybody should have the chance to be a janitor. Perspective's the key here for any business, because then you understand the culture you're building, because it's not just you and your C-level suite, it's everybody that works in your organization, even part-timers.
I know we have a lot of students that are here in the audience. And there's different schools of thought, like, right? There's a surge of now there are schools that have the entrepreneur, courses and whole programs that are devoted to that. Talking to the students that are here, some of who are your students, I'm sure, how would you tell them to approach that? Is it a combination of the studying that, so you get the basic groundings, or step out and kind of do some things?
Well, I think first is try it to see if you even like it, right? That's the environment where you can fail without losing everything you've built. The other thing is I don't think you can teach entrepreneurial spirit. I think take in process, right? We can teach a process to get to some decisions. And maybe the best decision you make, and we run startup weekends for this reason. There's one reason we run startup weekends that tie into this. We run it so people in 3 days can understand what it means to be an entrepreneur. And on Sunday, the people who say, I'm never gonna do this again, I'm as happy about as the people who win, because then they've kind of figured out their path. They've taken a safe place to fail, but they also looked inward to figure out what they're really good at or where they're gonna thrive. Because I don't think anybody in this room and most people on this planet want anybody to just be a complete disaster. We want everybody to be happy and in some place in their life where they're comfortable, they're not complacent, but
They're comfortable.
happy.
One of the, we read a lot in the press about what New York State is doing in terms of supporting entrepreneurship. And we've got, in our area, there's a lot of different things that are the Tech Valley region, a lot of tech-focused things, but a lot of entrepreneurs are not tech-focused. There's more things that are going on besides tech. What are some of the things? I know one of the initiatives that you have really is designed to help smaller businesses, existing businesses. There's a lot of things that help startups, but startups, although they need the help, they don't have the money, right? So one portion of your company is one that really deals with larger, well-established companies. You've got the whole, InFocus brands, focus of companies that are just kind of, I have an issue, here's some money, handle that for me and taken care. But you talk about some of the other initiatives that you have that are more designed to help establish smaller businesses.
Well, I think anybody who looks at startups and entrepreneur can add value to existing businesses to rethink how they're working. Most companies at certain points in their history are going to hit plateaus, and if you have the same team and you're not looking outward, you kind of get stuck in neutral for a long time or forever until you collapse or figure it out. So we bring a lot of what we've learned for all these years of building companies to existing companies to rethink how they're working, to make them more efficient. But I will add something. Entrepreneurs and this collaborative environment we live in upstate New York is fantastic, but you also have to meet and interact with people that are actually running businesses so you get the other perspective, right? Because we all sit in a room, we're all entrepreneurs, we all have these great ideas, we're all happy that we have this idea that's making us no money, but we have these big dreams. Go talk to people that have been out in the marketplace, on the street, for a long time, because you're going to get a different perspective, and the balance is best, right? I love that energy, but sometimes it has to be balanced with some reality checks.
So that almost sounds as if that kind of leads into like the internship for companies, for students that are perhaps in school or even being able to serve in companies in a capacity where they have that opportunity to kind of test drive, not unlike Startup Weekend, but having a chance to kind of test drive what they're.
Yeah, it's internships, but if you're actually running a company right now and it's a startup, there's so many events every day of the week. Don't always go to the same startup or entrepreneur events. Go to chamber events where those are fairly stodgy, but you can pick people's brains, you can get a different perspective. No offense to chambers. But, there's a million events. I would even go to just meetup events for something that's outside of your area, just to meet new people. Because you can never have a strong enough network. It's the network and community you build around you that's going to make or break your idea.
So I know we touched briefly on retention, and I know that is a thing that startups come and they go. A lot of businesses don't last 5 years. I think that they either because they don't have the money, they run out of runway with finances. But keeping, I think not just for startups, but businesses in general, keeping your employees happy is something that is key and would be vital. So talk a bit about the retention of employees.
Sure, and I think retention issues with larger companies is even a bigger issue than startups, where there's 50 people coming in the front door, but 110 being let out the back. And a lot of times they get in the mindset that if I can pay you less, you have more value to my bottom line than somebody that's making too much money, and I can transition them out. Retention for us is very important because I can never pay somebody too little for the experience that they've had. they're worth every dollar they get and then some, because they've lived a life with us and they've lived through things, and they're kind of a historical marker for our companies. So for us, retention is important to just making us relevant, keeping us sustainable, and keeping it vibrant. I think anybody has to look at retention as the single most important aspect of your job as a CEO or owner of a company. If you hire the right people, they should never leave. And that means that you have to do everything to coach them, empower them, and make them feel that they're part of the culture, the company, and that you're not going to send them out the door the first time the company has an issue. That takes a long time to build that trust and that respect. But if you're in the foxhole together, it happens a lot quicker than from the outside.
You talked about there have been times that you felt, if it wasn't for the people around you, there might have been times that you would have been like, and that's something that I like to ask is, you know, have you had experiences that just made you think, you know what, no, I don't even want to do that. Have you had those, and if so, how were you able to just kind of to move to the next phase with those?
Well, I think you have to be able to classify issues that send you over the edge into, is this something that's going to have a very long-term impact on my company, or is this something I have to deal with this month and move on? I think every day, at least during windshield time, you think about, why the hell am I doing this? And what could I be doing better? Maybe owning a bar or laying on a beach. So I think every day, I think that's normal. I think if you're starting or running a company, you're going to have that every day. Every day's not rosy. There's some days that are awesome. Most days they have kind of a mix. I think you have to, you know, as the owner or the leader, you have to look above that one issue and say, why are we all here together? What are we doing? Are we still on track? Is our brand still important? Do we actually have a culture that means something to all these people? And it's a big responsibility when you start looking at your staff and realize that all their families are based on this job or this career they have. That's a big responsibility, and a lot of times it gets overwhelming. And if you have to make payroll every week or every month, you know, that's a hard issue to deal with on certain months or quarters or years that are just absolutely disastrous.
So just kind of, and again, it sounds like it all goes back to really kind of knowing who you are and building that, choosing people, surrounding yourself with people that know who you are, they kind of are in, and placing them in the right positions within the company to kind of keep that relationship.
Yeah, and I can only answer this for myself. I'm really thick-headed, so stubborn really works for me, so that's the other part of it.
I want to make sure that we leave time for folks to ask some questions. But what, you know, what would you like the people in this room to leave with? Like, if you were just to say, okay, I'm going to, and again, looking at the fact that I know we've got some students, some folks that are students, some folks that are, you know, already in business, some people that have new businesses, they haven't been in business too long. But what would you say that would be, you know, or a couple of things that you could kind of give to folks that would, kind of some nuggets to take with them?
I would say if you're thinking about starting a company, go coach somebody in something first. See if you really like that, because if you want a really viable company and you want great people around you for a long time and you want to make it work, coach somebody and see if you like that experience of coaching and what coaching really means. I think that's the greatest single message you could take out of this, is that you're not dictating anything to anybody. We don't live in a world where you can sell anything to anybody. We're all buyers now. That's what the internet's done for us. We all get to choose exactly what we want when we want it. So if you're going to empower people and keep them there, and you want to build this sustainable, beautiful idea, product, service, whatever you're doing, go coach something and see if you like it. I think that's the greatest activity you can do. It's great to sit in a room and think about how great your company's going to be, but I think you have to go out the door and try it. You know, Nike has a great tagline, just do it. It's fantastic. It's a little cliched at this point, but you do have to take activity. Thinking has to stop at a certain point, and you have to go out and see if it actually works. And the first step is, do I like that? Do I want to be that person that every day has to hold somebody's hand or talk somebody off the cliff or whatever we're doing that day, and has to deal with all the negativity from a client? You know, we never want to lose anybody. That's probably my stupid mindset, that once you're in the family, you're in, and that's clients, staff, vendors, investors, whoever. So we fight every day to make sure that everybody's at least heard. They can't always be listened to, but they can be heard. We don't have to act on what they're saying, but they have to be respected enough to actually have a voice at the table. I think coaching is a great way to balance that out. And the younger you can coach, the more you'll realize that's just like running a company. It's like corralling cats. So it's all good.
Okay,
And keep your sense of humor. Sense of humor is more important. I'm not that important in this dynamic. It's the people around me that make me important.
sense of humor, huh? I have a question for you.
You got a joke?
I've got better than a joke. If you could be any superhero, who would you be?
Superhero?
Superhero. Who would you be?
Depends on where I am.
What does that mean?
If I'm in the water, I want to be Aquaman.
That's okay. And if you're on land, you would be
I want to be Thor and Superman and all the other ones.
all together. You can
Just
only
put them
pick
all
one.
together.
You can only choose
I
one.
don't want to just be one.
Okay. Okay. This is going to take us to our question stage. So.
So Diamond Point is two things. One, it was my financial service firm that I owned that we sold a few years ago. And then Diamond Point Co-Development Fund was money we put together to actually match companies on a royalty basis. So most companies, you go out and raise money on an equity basis. You're giving up shares to somebody, and then they have a say at your board table, and you have to answer to them every day. And sometimes they think their dollar is more important than your idea. So then you get into that grapple. We believe in royalties. So royalties mean that we're going to work together to accelerate to a marketplace. It's going to make money, and off of that money, we're going to take our piece back. We're going to make our money off of the sale, not just the ownership. I think for startups, if you're looking to start a company, the hardest and the thing you should hold on to the most is 100% of your stock. All my companies, I own outright in stock. I have employee percentages and profit sharing in all the companies. They get the uptick on the company, but at the board table are all my closest senior advisors, but at the end of the day, I have the absolute say. And I only do that because most startups don't have the time, resources, or money to play the investor game. You don't have time to sit at the table and argue with investors and your board over decisions. If you have the only decision, you can move faster, and for us, everything's acceleration. So, and it's a little unique model because most people don't base it on royalties, because there's a lot of downside to doing it.
And is your focus still student-led businesses, or is it more?
No, it was never just student. But, so we believe in the interaction of all, right? Community, academics, and existing businesses. So we actually ran the gamut. Our biggest drop of money was to an overseas manufacturer that we're trying to pull here to the U.S., because that's our big focus right now is regional manufacturing in country. How do I know when to start? I never stop, so. I would say try one now while you're in school. Little, you'll learn a lot about yourself. And I think that's the most important thing you can do first. And you're still protected because you don't have to lose everything else, right? I would say always try to start something now. And I know the School of Management does a great job of giving you experience and letting you test out different businesses. So I would use that to your full advantage. And sometimes you don't know, it's a leap of faith. It's always a leap of faith. So we never stop testing the marketplace. We always build feedback loops into all our companies so that the marketplace always dictates to us, because sometimes you can build something that's very relevant now, and with the speed of what we live in, 3 months from now, it's not relevant anymore. And if we're waiting to get that answer after they stop buying, then we're out of business. So we have a constant feedback loop in our companies. So we're always getting new market data. At a certain point, you can overanalyze anything, right? I think sometimes people are selling to the wrong market. They have great ideas, but they think their target market's the wrong market. So I'll start with the how do you find good people. I think that goes back to the comment about knowing yourself and knowing what you need. Right? At first, you're going to test out a lot of people and make a lot of mistakes because everybody's resume, everybody's LinkedIn profile, everybody's online presence, everybody's a genius and everybody's done everything. And then you meet them and they can't put 3 sentences together coherently. And they don't know how to add, but they want to be in the financial service world. So you meet those. So we've created filters to keep them out now because we know exactly who we need. But when you're first starting out, it's trial and error, right? And not jumping into something. I always tell people to wait, even clients, sit on this for 3 weeks before we come back to you. You need to absorb it. You need to know if it feels right. I mean, there's a certain part of it that isn't science, it's art, right? Because or test them out with internships if you're trying to, or do a pet project, or do something together. You know, we do a lot of that team building stuff with other clients who don't seem to get along, because then you really see the disconnects in their personalities. And some people should never work together. And the second part of that question was an idea. The ideas usually come from other people. If it comes from us, it's probably something we saw that we wanted to fix, or that we thought we could do better. There's the hubris and the arrogance sometimes. You can get ideas from a lot of places. I always say start with the things you love to test. It'll keep you passionate longer when everybody's telling you you're an idiot. So for me, it's always based on royalties. So we raise all our money for startups on royalties, which means a piece of this revenue created by the company. Certain companies, you have to start with equity. And John will talk to you about equities. That's what he does very well, right? But for us, we just don't like all the other layers of work that goes into the ownership. And we do have clients that we've raised money on equity for. I'm just talking about personally the way we work. It just works better and faster for us. And now we have a track record where people will give us money because they trust the royalty system. And it depends on what you're selling and the company you have. So we used to do lifetime royalties, and now we cap them at a certain percentage above what they made, usually 3 to 5x. 3 times to 5 times their money involvement. And once they reach that, then they can go, or they can re-up, because by then we'll have some other project. That's a lot more conversation about royalties versus equity. Equity is just a tough one if you're raising, because you need certain expertises that you probably can't afford, like a really good lawyer, a really good CPA. You know, you need really concrete documents, which you don't have the money to do. So you can do loans that convert into equity. That might be the safer way. So if you're doing well, you can pay those off. Convertible notes, that's probably a safer way than just going straight out equity. But at the end of the day, if you have 5 people in front of you and they want to give you money and you really want to do this thing, you're probably going to take whatever deal they throw your way. I wouldn't always recommend it, but it's going to happen. So. I'm going to disagree with that, because it comes back to the relationship of people to people. When you don't treat them like numbers and you actually know who they are, I think it's very easy, because then they start to manage themselves. Right? If you can set expectations and you hire the right people that embrace those expectations and goals, then you don't really have a lot of work to do, because they're just going to keep going. What you have to do is make sure they have all the resources so they have a higher probability of success than failure. Going back to coaching, when we coach, we don't put a player in a position where he or she is bound to fail. We put them in positions where they can get some confidence and they have a higher probability of success. Doesn't mean that they can't do more later, but at first you need to build confidence. You need to empower them so that they become comfortable with having their own perspective and their own thoughts. The hardest thing for our interns when they come in the door is they are put on the spot right away. What do you think about this? Most people don't want to share because they feel that they're not valuable enough. And you're going to live through it Friday, Daniel, so just prepare now. We don't care if you have a wrong idea. We all have wrong ideas, right? We all make mistakes. The team picks you up after time, but it's also making the mistake where you can learn from it. If you make the same mistake over and over, you shouldn't be there. And you won't be there, at least in our company, very long.
Of course, thank you, Mr. Manasier.
Thank you, Ms.
for
Patrice.
being our guest, and I think we are complete. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.